Great, thanks a lot, Ed. So what does all this mean then in the context of the last 9 months? So much has changed in this time, which has had a huge impact on the student journey. So in this section, we'll highlight what we see as being the big changes that have happened, and then what that means for institutions in the context of the student journey as we look ahead to 2021 and beyond. So before we do that, I just want to do a quick poll on the next slide, which will hopefully appear on your screens. So if you wouldn't mind voting on that, and really the poll is designed to get you thinking about some of the areas we'll be covering in a bit more detail shortly. We'll just wait for the responses to come back. Okay. Again, a bit like Ed, not 100% sure what I was expecting to see here, but a significant amount around the transition to online learning, which is very good because we will go on to talk about that in quite some detail. Okay, thanks all for doing that. What I wanted to pick up on from those options was actually start of term, and embarrassing, that's one area that no one voted for. But as an example, if we did look at start of term, a recent student crowd survey of 1,100 students and parents highlighted that 55% of those surveys said that the start of term was not what they were expecting, and 30% within this group said there was nothing good about starting term this autumn at all. To go one step further, within the same survey, 31% of respondents said going to university this year was the wrong decision for them. There are obviously lots of other areas of insight we could draw on, but the key message is that expectation for many has fallen short of expectation. So on to the next slide, just following on from that poll, and based on our experiences at SMRS and the challenges we have seen across the sector, we've identified 3 top-level key changes institutions have had to contend with when thinking about the student journey and experience. And these are distance economy, health, well-being and support, and finally dealing with uncertainty. So from the next slide, we'll look at each of these in turn. Okay, so the distance economy. We've all had to rapidly get used to doing everything remotely, from navigating those early and slightly awkward team meetings on Zoom to bigger things like converting an open day into an online experience. Much has changed, and we've pulled out a few here. First, we've seen a rapid and accelerated digitization. So as many of you have experienced in the summer, most institutions had to try and find a way of delivering an open day online. This meant putting together different platforms, pre-recording sessions, integrating live chat, and totally rethinking the traditional student experience to a digital one. The real-life face-to-face touch points are the ones that often have the most importance and impact for students, and this had to be recreated in a virtual setting. And I think as a sector, HE did a brilliant job mobilising everything so quickly. And according to Uni Taster Day's website, there was something like 830 online events listed this year, which will represent a massive year-on-year increase. Secondly, digital habits are being reformed. In particular, this relates to the learning experience and going back to how you voted in that poll. And so the learning experience has changed significantly. Blended or fully online teaching is needed to happen at pace and scale. For many institutions, this might be using legacy learning management systems and utilising materials not designed as digital first. The first term experience for the students this year would have been like never before and will undoubtedly have some impact on satisfaction and possibly retention. However, for many people, online learning has now become a more viable option. The freedom to learn anytime, anywhere, and built around everyday flexibility is very appealing. And on this point, we've carried out our own online distance learning ODL research to better understand the UK ODL market and surveyed a national sample of about 3,500 students. And from this group, 20% said they're more likely to take online learning now than pre-COVID. Our research also uncovered that decision-making timelines are reduced significantly. The online students and consideration sets are much, much smaller, often as low as just 1 or even 2 institutions. So in order to deliver a seamless experience for those students considering online, processes and structures will need adapting to accommodate this growing demand and prioritisation. But it's not just the immediate potential students we should consider. According to data from the IFS, secondary school students spent an average of 5 hours a day home learning online during the first lockdown. So how has this experience shaped their perception of online learning in the future? They're going to now be accustomed to studying online and have future expectations for it. So people's habits across the board have had to reform, but looking ahead, will the experience at universities match? And the final change we've highlighted here is evolution at pace. Many institutions have not only adapted, but have also evolved the approaches they've taken over the summer. So if we were to look back at events again as an example, some have gone from mass online open days, covering every subject level and course type online, to much more focused, smaller scale events, providing greater relevancy and interaction opportunities. Some institutions have gone even further and have invested very significantly and developed sophisticated, always-on open day containers with built-in virtual tours, taster sessions, pre-recorded messages, integration of things like UniBuddy and chatbots. And Derby On Demand is quite a nice example of this. So if you imagine if you're a prospective student considering a few different universities at the moment, you'll be influenced by the virtual experiences you have. And this will likely be a significant factor in the choice you make. At SMRS, we conducted quite a lot of virtual open day research over the summer and into the autumn. And from our experience, these type of changes have shown an agility, a response, a rapid evolution that we've not seen before. And all of this is centered around delivering a better, more relevant, flexible. So then on to the next slide. What all this might mean for the future. If we could just move on to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So what might this mean for the future? I think there are a few areas to consider when planning for the future from an experience perspective. Blended and online learning is clearly going to be an area that requires investment and focus. Being able to deliver education flexibly in a range of formats needs to be enhanced for many institutions, so the blended learning experience is high quality and seamless. Performance stats and reporting need to be revised and adapted to the current climate. Attendance metrics and conversion need to be viewed through a slightly different lens. Taking more of an always-on approach will need to be considered to account for what will likely be a different application cycle again this year. Agility will continue to ensure you can react and respond to changing situations, and using hindsight of the last 9 months. I think it's clear that ODL will continue, online distance learning will continue to grow. And just for a bit of context around that, from March to September, the edX provider Coursera reported 21 million new users, which is a 353% increase year on year, and 50 million course enrollments, which is 444% year on year growth. So huge uplift in demand there. Search volumes for ODL keywords grew from around 380,000 to nearly 800,000 in the UK in just 2 months. And slightly aside from that type of analysis, in our ODL research, 83% of the employers we surveyed feel like the online provision is sufficient to meet traction, development and training needs. So what all this tells us is that people's views across the board towards ODL have changed, and therefore the experiences they have need to change as well. And finally, virtual events. They need to form a key part of wider events planning. They're more cost effective than on-campus events and are evolving into on-demand content hubs. Most of them have very slick user experience and flexibility. At the moment, they are a core part of the marketing approach, but looking ahead, they can effectively coexist with campus experiences and crucially will be a central part of the student experience. So over to Ed for the next section.
Thanks, Tim. So health, wellbeing and support. Over the last 9 months, this has really been brought into real focus. It's obviously not a new area for us as a sector, but it has become more of a priority as, understandably so, more people have needed support and different types of support. So we've been also under, as institutions and as a sector, under increased public scrutiny. So the pressure's really been on to get it right. And that's been especially challenging as it's meant providing services to students taking different study approaches. So blended or fully online experiences, which certainly for some institutions has meant a complete reimagining of service delivery. And I think, and our view from SMRS's perspective is that the sector's responded amazingly here. We've seen changing communications to highlight support services, absolutely putting them front and centre through dedicated emails. We've seen enhanced content on content hubs. We've seen the curation of blogs that have been written by fellow students to promote messages. And you know, those have been around solidarity, support, and even gratitude at quite a challenging time. Some really inspirational stuff has been out there. But we've also seen institutions being proactive and developing new services and taking these directly to students. So as an example, one which really stood out to us was the welfare service at City Uni made over 1,300 calls to first year students over the first 2 weeks of term, just to check in and offer support as needed. And we work with another London-based university, and they've developed affiliations with external services, so people like Nightline, which is an amazing organisation and enables students to contact trained student volunteers for emotional and practical support. And I'm sure, you know, you've all got heaps of examples from your own institutions as well. So I think, you know, it's really clear that we've seen significant developments in pace in terms of what institutions offer. We've seen changing requirements from our audiences and the support needs that they have. And I'd argue a more comprehensive and far-reaching service has been developed as a consequence. So moving on to the next slide, what does that mean for the future? There we go. You know, I'd imagine, sorry, that's not the right slide. There we go. Yes. Yes, what does it mean for the future? I imagine, you know, if we were to take learnings from what we've been through and apply them to the future and properly resource support services to always operate in this way, I think it would be pretty special. And actually just make this level of support standard. Now, attrition is a problem for some universities more than others, but no matter what your baseline, there's always an opportunity to reduce it. And although we've seen a combination of blanket and targeted support measures deployed over the last few months, I think there's also opportunity to better identify individuals most in need and deliver more targeted support to them. Now, I believe that through enhanced audience understanding, there's a really exciting opportunity here that we could deploy support services much earlier in the journey and support those individuals who would get most benefit from it at the earliest possible point. Potentially right from the point of inquiry, which could then mitigate issues further down the line. And a lot of the development work over the last few months has put us in a much better position to do that. At least it has from a support services perspective, because they've developed ways of working which will put them in good stead for the future, but they can't do it alone. So they'll need better internal integration with the likes of marketing, you know, and for us to go forward with audience insight to help them better identify and deliver those services. So back to Tim, let's cover the last section here.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So the final area here is a big one, dealing with uncertainty. So what's changed? Well, in a nutshell, everything. Years and years of legacy processes have needed to be adapted and changed to accommodate all of the unravelling uncertainty. Whether this has been admissions and changes that have needed to be made, or bringing departments and teams together remotely to deliver virtual events, or delivering blended and online learning at scale. Managing changing situations with a lack of clear guidance, dealing with crisis comms and management as part of BAU, rapidly changing approaches to clearing, all have had to happen quickly, and many will no doubt have impacted on the experience of the student. However, some of the changes may have brought about positive change to experience, and these need to be developed and taken forward. Secondly, working structures have changed. We've all had to adapt to a completely new way of working. Getting used to operating from home, away from face-to-face interaction, has been challenging. Managing a team or leading a department has meant adopting new approaches. We've had to grapple with new technology and get used to providing student-facing activity and their experiences remotely. But how has the student experience been impacted by this? How has it benefited in some cases, and how can these improvements be taken forward? And finally, priorities. With everything institutions have had to contend with, prioritisation has had to largely be around reacting to ever-changing situations. The way we deliver experiences have been totally turned on its head. Key project work may have been sidelined, and quickly redeploying resource and budget has been a necessity. Communications to students have been an absolute priority, meaning any sort of research or insight work, satisfaction surveys, focus groups have been put on hold. And as Ed was saying earlier, insight really will become absolutely imperative, as universities will need to understand the new generation of students. And these are students with a changed view on the world, and their future journeys and experiences will be based on developing and actioning this new understanding. So priorities may have changed, and behind the scenes, this could well impact or have impacted on experience, especially if work put on hold is insight focused. However, I think in this time we'll all have adopted new and innovative approaches, and the door is now open and there's an opportunity to evolve some of these further. So if we just move on to the next slide. What does this then mean for the future? So the last 9 months have definitely taught us the need to have contingency and plan ahead for more uncertainty to reduce the impact on our longer term plans. It's also likely the 2021 recruitment cycle will be different again. I think, Jan 15 deadline, the data from that will be a first real indicator, but we could well see a high proportion of applications rolling in after the deadline. We could also see universities making a lot more offers, and that in turn could have a significant impact on clearing. Creating and enhancing that infrastructure for online learning, like events and online activity like events and online learning will be key. And I think the last 9 months would have identified some of those areas for improvement, and also areas that would have impacted negatively on the student experience. We can also assume that the student expectation has changed, increased public scrutiny on the sector, challenges over fees and experience of learning platforms will mean adopting to deal with these evolving situations. And finally, and coming back to the heart of this presentation, prioritising the student experience should really be a key focus for 2021. Many key student journey touch points in the last 9 months would have changed, and the level of importance and the actual experience of these touch points might well highlight some significant disconnects, which in turn could influence the choices that students make in the future. So we know there are likely to be more bumps in the road ahead, but we can take forward our learnings and the positives from this, and in doing so, I think identify where the experience can be improved to not only help with recruitment moving forward, but also longer term advocacy as well.